All right, so Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, let's start off by saying Brakatham, Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shah. And I want to give all and the glory to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, Bahashim, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. And shout out to the hopefully let, starting with the 144,000. Shalom. Right, so Lord willing, right, when you go into the lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, right? And, he says, but the title of the lesson is, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, right? And you know, going into history, whatnot, you have them wicked scribes and Pharisees, that so they was killing the prophets, right? They was despising, like the apostles, the prophets, for teaching the truth unto the Gentiles or whatnot, because them guys weren't circumcised or they weren't keeping laws and commandments, things as such, right? And we understand that, when Yahushua came on the scene, that's what he was letting them know, that he obviously Yahushua, he got on the wicked scribes and Pharisees. He cussed them out in a sense, right? Because them guys, them guys are Jews outwardly, right? Try to profess the high, they love the high seat. Try to profess they so perfect, they keep the laws. And you have a lot of these, you have a lot of these guys like that today, right? Try to be pushing the law, right? Trying to come against the true prophets, the true men, Yahweh Shah, saying they wrong. We telling you, no man is judged by the law. You're not gonna make it to the kingdom by keeping the laws and commandments. We done broke that down plenty of times. Galatians 2, 21. It tells you how when you basically pushing the law in a sense, right? When you pushing the law, and you basically you making Yahushua sacrifice void, right? You make his sacrifice be of no reason. That's why he came and uplifted us from the law, right? Not to do away with the law, he came to fulfill the law, right? He came and uplift us from the curse of the law, right? So, matter of fact, before we start there, I'm going to go back to here. I want to read Revelation 2, right? And we'll start at verse 8. It says, and unto the angel, right, of the church in Samaria, right? I was like I was saying it wrong. Saminer, right? It's like I was saying it wrong again, right? But you can see read. It says, right. He said that, it says, these things said the first, these things said the first and the last was dead and is alive. That's talking about Yahweh Shah, right? He says, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, right? And are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, right? And we understand, right? It's the twofold scripture, A lot of brothers use it, we're going into those phonies in our land, but ultimately this is speaking of it's speaking of when Yahushua writes to the church, it's speaking of those Jews who have that outward appearance, right? Killing the prophet, despising the prophet, trying to push law as if they're some perfect people, right? Once again, as I mentioned again, right? We're not judged by the law, right? In Galatians, I'll say it's 3:16, Galatians 2:16, if I'm not mistaken, right? He speaks about that. No man justified by the law, because the Most High knew we couldn't keep the laws and commandments perfect, right? So when Yahushua came on the scene, that's why he brought the gift of faith. Right, his faith is a gift. Everybody ain't gonna receive it. He brought the gift of faith. We're saved by faith and grace. Because if it was by the law, we done. Right? This creature was made subject to vanity. We go off on things we don't even know we go off on. But you have these wicked scribes, these Pharisees, right? They love these high seats, love all that. They try to paint this perfect image of themselves. Trying like this, keeping laws, commandments perfect. Like they some perfect people in a sense, but we not. We don't obtain the perfection in the kingdom. Right? That's why when you go into that's why you go into the sacrifice house, we don't sacrifice no more things. So going into the second covenant, we will be made perfect. And that's through the gift of what? Yahweh Shah laying down on the cross for us, right? But let's read this right here, right? That's talking about Jake of our nation, right? Like the wicked scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, and the high priest who had that outward appearance of being a Jew, but inwardly they was killing the prophets, right? This was going on, right? Despising them, killing them. Right? I forgot Polycarp. I think this is Polycarp got Polycarp. Yep. Polycarp. He was martyred. He was killed for what? Teaching the truth. Right? He was killed for teaching the truth. Right? I said, let me look like this. Let me see if it. Let me see if it. See what it says. I'll type this in. Let's see. The name is Yahweh Shai, but I'm just typing this in just for, Google purposes, right? I'm going to say faith of Yahweh Shai, right? But it says, yes, that's exactly right. From the perspective, Roman authorities refused to worship the emperor was the legal crime, but the sole reason, right? Yeah, they trying to put that in, but this is what I want. But the sole reason, right? Polycarp refused was his absolute devotion to teaching and living the faith of Yahweh Shai. That's what you got to understand, right? It's not about the laws and commandments. They want to come up against these people, right? Because they getting mad, in a sense, right? Because, when Yahweh Shai come on the scene, Yahweh Shai tell them that, that we're not going to be saved by keeping the law. We're not saying you go out here and do what you want to do, right? Apostle Paul talked about it in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 17. He said the law was just there to basically hold us down till the gift of faith came, right? When the gift of faith came, you got to think this faith is a gift, right? So everybody don't receive it. So you have these guys who keep trying to push the law, right? But Paul told them, if you're going to go read, right? Let's go ahead and grab it, right? Paul told him, right? He's a Jew inwardly, right? And let's start at 26, right? Through the Spirit, right? Matter of fact, start at 25, right? It says, for circumcision is verily profitable, right? If thou keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. Thy circumcision is made uncircumcision, right? And understanding, right? We understand it spiritually, right? Like you said, being circumcision is keeping the law, right? And then being uncircumcision is breaking the law, right? And so in our nation, right? You gotta understand, it was given to us that all males, right? I forgot the age, but we got a certain age, we get circumcised, right? And when you go into the time of the Hellenist period, the Maccabees and whatnot, Jake wasn't on that. Jake was in that Greek mindset, so Jake was putting his joint back on his shelf, putting the skin back on his joint, all type of things, because it wasn't seen to be a righteous Greek in a sense, right? If you were circumcised, right? That's why they had the gymnasium, right? Would mean naked. They would be naked in the gym, right? If you had that in circumcision, right? They was like, oh no, he lame, he ain't a good Jew, right? But let's continue reading on, right? It says, therefore, if the uncircumcision keepeth the righteous of the law, right, shall not his circumcision be counted for circumcision, right? It says, if the Gentiles, talking about the Israelite foreigners, obey Yahweh's law, won't Yahweh declare them to be his own people, right? It says, and shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, right, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by letter and circumcision does transgress the law, right? Verse 27 NLT. In fact, uncircumcised Gentiles who keep Yahweh's law will condemn you Jews who are circumcised and possess Yahweh's law but don't obey it, right? Because those ones who are grafted in, you got to think the ministry of the Gentile, started with Peter, and then it took about Paul. So Paul talked about in Romans 11, those ones who was grafted in, right? Those Gentiles are those ones who grafted in, those Israelite foreigners, right? Who's raised up in the ways of the ways of them other nations, things as such. So when they teaching them truth, they're like, what you teach them that for, right? They ain't keeping the law. They don't carry themselves. They not a Jew. He's a Gentile. You have people of our nation with Greek names, and they spoke Greek, they spoke different languages because they was raised up amongst those other nations, right? But we understand that's the faith of Yahweh Shai when they was grafted in. Right, they was grafted into that tree. That's the gift, because all Israel going to be saved, beginning with the elect. And amongst those Gentiles, the ones who grafted in, you have elect members. Right? So let's read that again. Verse 27 NLT. It says, in fact, uncircumcised Gentiles, meaning ones who don't have the law, don't know the law, don't keep the law, right? Who keep Yahweh's law, right? Will condemn you Jews who are circumcised and possess Yahweh's law and don't obey it. So those ones who are grafted in, right? And they when they grafted in and they repent and turn back, they replace the ones that's who out here pushing law, trying to be an outwardly Jew, right? Loving the high seats, things of that such, right? Let's get to verse 28 and back at the KJV. It says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, right? You know, because like I mentioned, you know, you had people in our nation had Greek names, right? You know, they had ones. You had those ones grafted in, right? Well, that's the count I'm thinking about. Acts 1 says 13. Bro, when the Most High spoke about he gonna working your days, when Paul they was teaching, right? And the Jews was envy. They was mad. So why are you teaching them? Matter of fact, I got some notes. I got some notes right here. Oh, why are you teaching them the truth, man? They ain't Jews, man. They don't care themselves as such, right? I got some notes right here, right? So they was persecuting the prophets with teaching about Yahushua, which they didn't want to hear, right? They was teaching to the Gentiles, which were the Israelite foreigners. They was saying, why you letting the uncircumcised come in, right? And that's what you got to understand. Those uncircumcised or those Gentiles, those Israelite foreigners, they were brought in what? Through the faith and grace of Yahushua, right? You know? Right, so we stay right here. We'll go back to the do it about it. Remember, we stay right here, right? Verse 28, it says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. And that's what these guys have, an outwardly appearance. These false prophets, right? You know, you have these guys pushing law, this stuff, trying to seem all perfect. No, we know we're not perfect. You know, we slip up at times we don't even know we slipped up on, right? But it ain't, you know, that's why the faith, the grace of Yahushua is upon us. Remember, Apostle Paul talked about it in 2 Corinthians, I want to say it's chapter 12 or chapter 9, I think it's chapter 12, right? You know, he spoke about how, you know, that thorn in the flesh, right? And he asked the Most High to remove from him 3 times, right? But he said, your grace is sufficient, right? Most of my weakness, because Yahushua is going to uplift us from this weak nature, which is this flesh. He's going to deliver us from this weak nature, right? So now it's about faith and grace and staying focused in the truth, right? You know, I went to lesson yesterday, being the unit, right? Basically, you know, putting off all the ways of this world where you got so much wickedness and so much, you know, so much wickedness and so much things going on around you with money, you know, clout chasing, all these things going on. This wicked place that we in Babylon, staying focused in this truth, staying focused in the spirit, right? Doing the work, doing the will of Yahushua. That's what we put here to do. Those are Jews which are Jews inwardly, right? Yeah, you got these camps like IUIC, be teaching about the law. You see them with these big old, like wicked scribes and Pharisees, man. You see them walking around, they purple garments on, looking all flashy. Those are outwardly Jews, man. Right? They're not really in the spirit. They're doing it for money. They're doing it for clout. They're not really in the spirit of Yahushua, pushing the word in the truth and sincerity on it. Right? Those are outwardly Jews, man. You know, you're the ones who walk in the spirit, right? Matter of fact, we'll finish it, then I'm gonna grab it, right? This Romans 2, verse 28. It says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh, right? But he is the Jew, which is one inwardly, meaning in the spirit, that inward man. It's like after Yahushua, that inward man. Apostle Paul talk about it in this chapter. It's Romans chapter 7, right? You know, speak about how, you know, he go off when he don't mean to, right? But you gotta understand, Yahushua is gonna uplift us from this. He's gonna uplift us from this. He's gonna lift us from this weak nature, this flesh, right? You know, so when you go through the circumcision of, you know, speaking of it spiritually, he's going to keeping the law, right? You know, we keep the law to the best of our head. That's in the power, best of our ability. That's in the power of our hand, right? You know, and you got to think when we back then, right? When the prophets think that such, you know, even now when we teaching, you know, when they teaching these things, right? It's messing up the account with the high seats. You know, people starting to get out the church. People starting to come into the truth. Right, so they're not liking that. Like, why are you teaching them for? They're not liking that, right? Because it's messing up. It's messing up their money and stuff, man. You know, it's messing up their way. So these outwardly appearing Jews, they not liking that because now they start to understand. Like, hold on, this man been lying to me. This man been telling me I got to keep laws and commandments perfect. Like he keep laws and commandments perfect. Which now he ain't. Nobody keep laws and commandments perfect. Only man that was perfect was Yahushua, right? And that's why you got to understand that, you know, we're gonna be delivered from this flesh, right? But as I was saying, they ain't like those things. That's why they was killing the prophets. They ain't like those things, you know, because it was a thought slip my mind. I see this dude riding up, walking back and forth. But dang, he just slipped my mind what I was going to say. But yeah, coming back to what I was saying, you know, hopefully it'll come back to me. But they ain't like those things, right? You know, it's like they messing up the money, so they ain't want to hear about Yahushua, right? Because Yahushua, what? It's about the faith, grace, right? Understanding that we're going to be delivered, right? We can't keep laws and commandments perfect, right? You know, and that we've been uplifted from the curse of the law. Now it's about the faith and the grace that we keep within him, pushing the truth, doing the word, his ministry, right? So let's continue reading on. It says, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, meaning your mind, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men but of Yahweh, right? And this is why you're gonna go into it. Yahushua was cussing out wicked scribes and Pharisees, right? When you go to Romans 8 and 16. What it says, It says, the spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahweh. It's the spirit, right? The Rakakodash, the Holy Spirit, right? Which, when you walk in the spirit, guess what? Look at Galatians 5. Like, this Paul talking right here, what he telling him? Galatians 5:18, he said, but if you be led of the spirit, you're not under the law. Meaning what? When you walk in the spirit of Yahweh Shem Shah, you automatically do those righteous and sincere things. You automatically walk in that righteous step, that righteous way, you know? Which you have certain things you can't control, right? But you can automatically walk in that sincere way, right? This Romans 2 and 28 and 29 in NLT. It says, for you are not a true Jew just because you were born of Jewish parents or because you have gone through the ceremony of circumcision, right? Remember, you had those ones who was raised, you had those ones who was raised up in a Gentile state of mind, right? So verse 29 NLT, right, says, no, a true Jew is one whose heart, right, going into the mind. A true Jew is one whose heart or his mind is right with Yahweh, right? He's in the spirit, right? It says a true circumcision is not merely obeying the letter of the law. Rather, it is a change of heart produced by the spirit. A person with a changed heart seeks praise from Yahweh and not from people. And that's what you had these guys doing, seeking the praise of people, want to look good for the people, want to be a Jew outwardly. Oh yeah, I'm keeping laws of him. Yeah, I got my big garment on, walking around, got my friends on every day. No, right? That's that outwardly appearance. Right, they're not truly in the faith. Right, they want people to look at them. They want people to look at them good. You know, it's one who's a Jew inwardly through the spirit, who walk that spiritual walk, going down that narrow passage. And the spirit of Yahweh Shem Shah leads us down narrow passage to help us remain focused and fruitful. Right, bring forth righteous fruits. Right. So let's go to I want to go to Galatians. I want to read that 5:18 NLT. Let me go to Matthew 23. Right, this Galatians 5:18. Right, NLT. Right, it says, but when you are directed by the Spirit, you're not under the obligation of the law of Moses. Because why? The Spirit is going to lead you down that righteous path. Right, the Spirit is going to lead you down that righteous way. You know. If I want a precept going to that fast. You know, Lord willing, brothers and sisters who come watch videos, you get what I'm meaning. Right, you had accounts back then, like I said, we're going to go into Matthew 23, right, when Yahweh shall get on wicked scribes and Pharisees because they pushing the law. It's how you have these camps today pushing law. Right, you can't keep laws and commandments perfect. Right, it's about ones to do inwardly through the Spirit, who scribe and they who pushing in the truth, putting out the desires of the world, putting out the desires of their own self, their own way, and walking in the Spirit. And that's what's going to ultimately lead us to the perfection. And we've been made perfect through our sufferings, right? That disciplinary process, right? So, I should put praise in, man. Yep, right here. Right, John 12:43. Right, let's see if we can start up a little bit. Okay, let's start at, we'll start at verse 40. Right, from verse 39 actually. It says, therefore they could not believe because their Isaiah was Isaiah had said again. I think this is Isaiah 29, if I'm not mistaken. He quoted Isaiah 29 right here where it says, he had blinded their ears and hardened their heart. I mean their mind. I mean they can't receive the Spirit. Right, so let's go to it. If I'm not mistaken, he quoting Isaiah right here, Isaiah 29. Right, they won't be able to receive it or get it. Right. Yeah, right here. Right. Right here, right? Isaiah 29, started verse 10. It says, for the Lord Yahweh hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath covered your eyes, right? And the prophets and your rulers, the seers hath he covered. All the vision of this book is becoming to you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learning, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he said, I cannot read, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. Right? He said, I am not learned. Right? It says, wherefore the Lord said, for as much as the people draw near me with their mouth, with their lips do honor me, but remove their heart far from me. Let me see how actually. It's another one. Hold on, bear with me. It's another one, bear with me, that I wanted. I know we speak about it in Matthew 13. Right, let's get back to it. Right? Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna start at verse 38 actually too. Right? You know, and this is Isaiah. I want to say, what's that believe that report? I want to say it's Isaiah 50 something, or it might be 40. Isaiah 53, right? Isaiah 53, right? But let's get back to it. Let's get back to verse. We start verse 38, right? It says that the saying of Isaiah, right, or Isaiah, right? It says, might be fulfilled, which the Lord Yahweh, who had believed our report, and to whom he hath the arm of the Lord has been revealed. Okay, that messed me up, right? With it being split like that, right? It said this, that the saying of Isaiah or Isaiah, the prophet might be fulfilled, right? That the prophet might be fulfilled, which he spake, Lord, who hath believed our report, and to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed. It says, therefore they could not believe, because Isaiah said again, because that Isaiah was Isaiah said again, right? He has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart. They should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, in their spirit, and be converted, and I should heal them. Bear with me, because it's a precept I want to read on that, right? It's saying that they'll never be able to understand it, right? They'll never be able to understand it until this place is destroyed. Let me see. Oh, it might be Isaiah 9. Oh, Isaiah 6. Isaiah 6. He quoting Isaiah 6. Here it is, right? He quote this the precept. Slaki, not Isaiah 29, Isaiah 6. I know I went bugging, right? So this is Isaiah 6, I start verse 9. And the point, what I want is verse 11. It says, and he said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. Right? It says, make the heart of these people fat, make their eyes heavy, and shut their eyes, that they see with their eyes, and they should hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and meaning their mind, and convert and be healed, right? Because they'll never be able to get it. Yahweh outside is blocking them from getting it or receiving the Spirit. But here's the point I wanted. Then said, Lord, how long? He answered, until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate, right? So they'll never be able to understand this truth until what? Till the place destroyed. They'll understand it in the kingdom. They'll get it in the kingdom. And this is one of my favorite precepts, in a sense. I watch the Elder Apostle Bar break it down. And a little side note to the Spirit fast. Because this is what Jake don't understand. How most I say 2/3 of people gonna be destroyed. Because what he say? My people destroyed for lack of knowledge. And you ain't gonna get it on this side. Right? This goes to show you all that, that Christianity, everybody gonna be saved. No. Right? This goes to show you right here. Most High is blocking people from he's blocking certain people from being able to understand this truth. Right? Because they gonna learn it when this place is destroyed. Right? This is what they was said to do. You have men corrupt and unaware who was condemned to condemnation. Or you have men said to be destroyed. Right? And they ain't gonna get it or understand it till what? To get in the kingdom. Right? But let's get back to this. All right. How about you? Verse 40 again, he said, he has blinded their eyes, right, hardened their heart. They should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, and be converted, and I should heal them. These things said Isaiah, right? Or Isaiah, when he saw his glory and spake of him. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers, also many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, right? What would you read, right? The synagogue of Satan, going into those gates, those outwardly Jews, man, right? You know, because Yahushua is perfect, right? They you know they coming to they tried to turn him over, you know, because they trying to say he wrong, but ultimately what? They couldn't stand Yahushua because he was perfect, you know. They couldn't stand him, right? Because Yahushua was proving them wrong. Yahushua tell them, no, you ain't gonna get into the kingdom by keeping laws and perfect. It's by me. What he tell him? No man coming to the Father but by me. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You know, Yahushua knew why he was sent. He said it in Apostle Paul quoted in Hebrew. Yahushua said, right? You know, Most High said he ain't have no more delight and burnt offering and fat offering. Right? He said a body has not prepared me, and many don't understand that. Yahushua loosened the seals for us, man. They don't understand that. They don't get it. And you look at scribes and Pharisees, they didn't want to hear about that because the money, the clout, the praise of men they was receiving, right? You know, Yahushua was stepping away with it just out now. Right, these guys, Yahushua's a stomach block to these guys. They don't get it. These outwardly Jews, right? Because they love the chief seat. They love the chief seats, right? They love being seen outwardly, being seen so cool and so so righteous to the people, right? Ultimately, they wicked. What the Spirit say, who outwardly watch out for these false prophets or inside, which are ravening wolves, man. Whole time they're ravening wolves. They don't really care about the flock. Right, but here's the point right here in verse 43. I'm gonna read verse 42 again, right? And that's gonna read the NLT. It says many people did believe him, right? You know, it says many people did believe him, including some of the Jewish leaders, but they wouldn't admit it for the fear of the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue. These outwardly Jews, man, right? You know, so here it is the point, verse 43. For they love the praise of men more than the praise of Yahweh, man. Right? And this is what the outwardly Jews, this is what they do. Right? That's why they get on these interviews. That's why they get on these platforms. That's why they push all that they want to be so known. Right? IUIC, these camps, IUIC, it's more camps. We know IUIC is one of those main ones who create all this stumbling block and this confusion because they love the praise of men. You know? They want to taste that clout, you know, taste that clout in a sense. You know, these outwardly Jews. And it ain't about that. You know, it's about the spirit. If you're truly righteous in the spirit, man. You know, and how about Yahushua know who's truly righteous in the spirit? You know, right? So let's go to Matthew 23. Go to Matthew 23, right? And we'll start at verse 1, right? It says, Then spake Yahushua to the multitude, to the disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, right? It says, All therefore whatsoever, right, they bid you observe and do, right? But do not after their works, for they say and do not. Right? Because they saying keep the law, but they ain't keeping the law. They ain't keeping the law perfect. Because you got to think, you break one law, you accounted for them all, right? It's verse 3, it says in the NLT, so practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example, for they don't practice what they teach, right? Hypocrites. Verse 4 in the KJV, but they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move with one of their fingers, right? It says, but all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their flatteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. What they do, right? You know, it's what they do. Walk around them high seats, right? Sitting in the chief seat in the middle of the whole congregation. You know, only one speaking. Make people raise their hand and speak to you. You know, right? As it says in verse 6, it says, and love the utmost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogue, right? And greetings in the market, and to be called of men, rabbi, right? But be not ye called rabbi, right? For one is your master, even Yahushua, and all your brethren, because Yahushua is the only rabbi. Yahushua is the only teacher. You don't see Yahushua, he came down with 100% truth. And he passed the truth down to men to teach the truth, which is the disciples, right? It's turned to apostles, man. You know, he's sitting them with the 100% truth, teach the word, teach the truth. And these Pharisees, they was killing them because why? You know, Yahushua was telling them, though, that, hey, I'm coming to deliver you from the law. You know, because the law, we broke the covenant. We broke the laws and commandments. That's why Yahushua came and laid down the cross to forgive us for our sins, right? You know, lift us from the curse of the law. That's why we're going to say, come, we're going to be saved, we're going to be made perfect in the kingdom. We're going to be delivered from this weak nature, this flesh that I spoke on earlier, right? Let's see. I want to jump down. I said right here. Let's read verse 13, right? I'm just jumping down through the chapter, by Lord willing. So I can bear with me, right? It says, "But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for you need to go in yourselves. Neither suffer ye in them that are entering to go in." Right? Verse 13 NLT, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of the religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves, and you don't let others enter either. Woe unto you, scribes and you Pharisees, you hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses and pretense make long prayer. Therefore you shall receive greater damnation." Right? You see how it says in NLT of both times, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees." This is what they're doing. They're trying to teach. And once again, get this correct. I'm not saying that you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do, right? You keep the laws, commandments to the best of your ability, right? But teaching the law, pushing the law, no, right? Those are outwardly Jews, man. They want to seem perfect in front of the people, right? You can't keep the laws, commandments perfect. That's why Yahweh Shai had to come on the scene, right? And even when he came on the scene, you still had those ones who were still trying to what? That's why they basically voiding Yahweh Shai, basically saying, look, we don't need him to get to the kingdom. But which is your only way to get to the kingdom is through him. We can keep laws, commandments perfect and we'll be good. You can't. You go off day to day. You don't even know certain things you go off on. One that I always quote it, man. Every time I speak on this, right? But like the one, what the scripture say, right? You should not eat of an animal if it die of itself, right? You don't know when they put that chicken on that market, or when they put that beef on that market, that animal died of itself, or they killed it right then and there. Then you're not eating. No, so you don't know that. Right, you breaking the law there, now you accounted for them all, right? So let's jump down a little bit more. I wanted where it says outside you look good, but inside you like a casket, a sepulcher with dead man's. Okay, come on, here it is right here. That's Matthew 23, starting at 25, right? It says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you make clean the outside of the cup, them outwardly Jews, right? And of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess," right? It says in NLT, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish," meaning what? Those outwardly appearance, right? Pushing the law, acting like they keep laws commandments perfect. High seat, got their skirt on up high, right? The nice garment, looking all good and clean on the outside, right? It says, "But the inside you are filthy." What? Meaning through their spirit. And truly in their spirit, they corrupt the underwears, man, right? In their spirit, right? But inside you are filthy, your spirit, right? Full of greed and self-indulgence, right? That's why Apostle Paul told him what, right? You was a Jew inwardly. It's he who's a Jew inwardly. It's he who bear witness through the spirit, right? Let's continue reading. It says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites, for you like the witted sepulchres, right, which indeed appear beautifully outward, right, meaning like caskets, right, but are within full of dead man's bones and all uncleanliness," man, right? It says, even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within are full of hypocrisy and iniquity." Let's read verse 27, 28 in NLT, right? It says, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, right? Beautiful on the outside, but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurity. Outwardly, you look like the righteous people." Yeah, we keep laws, law, right? That's what it say, right? "But inwardly, your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness," man, right? This what's going on, right? They're Jews outwardly, they got an outward appearance, but he is the Jew inwardly who bear witness through the Spirit, believing on, giving honor and glory and believing on, got faith in Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai. Yahweh being the Father by Hashem in the name of the Son Yahweh Shai. You can't keep laws commandments perfect to get into the kingdom, right? That's not gonna get you to the kingdom, right? You get into the kingdom through faith and grace, ultimately being of the elect. But all Israel gonna be saved anyway, right? But the elect gonna be the beginning with the elect, right? Because those are the ones who push his word sincerely and truth and believing in Yahweh Shai, outside keeping the faith. When everything around you is temptation, you stay strong in the sufferings and hardships of Yahweh Shai, right? Let's see. We can read down to verse 30. We used to stand in NLT, right? It says, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build tombs for the prophets your ancestors killed. You decorate the monuments of godly people your ancestors destroyed, right? Then you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would never have joined them in killing the prophets, right? But in saying that, you testify against yourselves that you are indeed the descendants of those who murdered the prophets, man, right? You know, because also mean that we're our fathers from back then, right? You know, and the ones who don't believe back then, right, they still don't believe. The ones who did believe back then, they do. And those are the ones who had that spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahshua. They were Kodash, man. They were Kodash, the Holy Spirit, you know. So as you can see, Lord willing, right, you know, the point is made, you know, through the Spirit. You have those outwardly appearance Jews. You have those ones who are truly in the Spirit, right? That's why the Spirit say, try the Spirit with the Spirit. So you have men credit unawares, those are prostate. You have those wicked scribes and Pharisees, right? Those Sadducees, wicked, man. Law this, law that. No, right? You know, and that's why. Let's go back to it again. When we close out, let's read it again. Romans 2. What Apostle Paul tell them? Right? I'm reading the NLT, Romans 2 and 29, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Right? 29 in NLT said, no, a true Jew is one whose heart, meaning their mind or their spirit, right, is right with Yahweh. That's why Yahweh told him what the kingdom, what they say, the wicked scribes and Pharisees demanded of him. I didn't say wicked, but I think it says the scribes and Pharisees demanded of him, right, once the kingdom comes, go to that. He told them the kingdom is not going to come with observation. It come what? Right? The kingdom is within. That's the inner rule, right? The mind being right with Yahweh Shem Yahshua, putting out this fleshly nation, right? Becoming that, because it's going to be a perfect kingdom. So we on this patient process to becoming perfect men, which we're going to receive that 100% load up, right, when we, you know, being up to the chairs and change to spiritual bodies. Right now we're getting ourselves in order, right, in this process that we on. Right, and it ain't through laws and commandments. Yeah, we keep laws and commandments to the best of our ability, but we enduring the suffering, the pain, the hardship, the disciplinary process to becoming a spiritual man, right? And that's all through the Spirit. We ain't out here walking around, you know, yeah, we on the highways and byways, teaching the word, teaching the truth, doing the lessons, right? But we ain't walking around, yeah, I'm a Jew, I don't mess with that, I don't do. Nah, we ain't doing all that. We don't got that out. We ain't trying to have that outwardly appearance. We trying to be right in the spirit, right in the mind, right? We Yahweh Shem Yahshua. But let's see. Yeah, that's all I wanted. Right here, 20. It says when he was the men of the Pharisees, and these same outwardly Jews, man, these same ones today, right? When he was the men of the Pharisees, when the kingdom of Yahweh should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of Yahweh cometh not with observation. Neither shall they say, lo here, lo there, for behold, the kingdom is within. The inner rule, walking in the spirit, being right in the mind with Yahweh Shem Yahshua, getting your house in order, getting yourself in order. Right, house meaning your body. House meaning you, your spirit. Right, getting yourself right, man. You know. You know. So Romans 2 and 29 in the NLT, close it out. No, a true Jew is one whose heart is right with Yahweh. A true circumcision is not merely obeying the letter of the law. Right? I ain't saying you break the law. I ain't saying you just go ahead and do whatever you want to do. No. Right? You keep the laws to the best of your ability. Right? You know, but it ain't just one who just keeping the laws, man. He's just a perfect Jew, right? No, as it says, it is rather it is a change of heart, right? Meaning what? Repenting, returning back to Yahweh Shem Yahshua, change of mind, get out of the way of their fleshly mindset, get out of the way of the world, right? It says a change of heart produced by the Spirit, the Kakodash, man, right? And the person with the changed heart seeks praise from Yahweh, not from people. Right, so we gonna do what the Heavenly Father said supposed to do. And that's what? Understand our call, teach the word, teaching the truth. Right? You know, wearing our garments to camp. Right? We gotta wear our garments every day. Right? We ain't in our homeland. Right? So just wearing your garment every day, you can damn near mark yourself, man. Right? Esau, you know, we gotta be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Right? To truly be learned, you gotta be as a serpent. You gotta know how you move. Right? You know? But Lord, that's for another day. Right, but Lord willing, right, the point is made, and sisters and brothers, you know, been edified, you know. So with that being said, try to close out. I give it all honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and shout out to the hopefully elect, starting with the 144,000. Shalom.